Hello everyone. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you some of the basics of this type of graphing calculator and then how to do specific things on the front page of our Transformation of Functions lab in our calculator to help you get started. So first things first, I'm going to focus on just the calculator. Hopefully you already have located the on button. It is down here in the bottom left corner. If you want to turn it off, notice above the on button here we have the off in blue. What that means is I need to come up here to the second button, which is also in blue. When I hit second, notice there's an arrow that pops up. That means I have engaged the second button. And then once I hit the on button again, it will actually turn it off. There's another button to be aware of, the alpha button. The alpha button is what you will use to access anything on the calculator that's written in green. And then if you haven't already figured out anything in blue, you'll need the second button. So when I press the alpha button, that changes to an A, meaning I have engaged the alpha button. And then if I want to get to something in green, let's say the letter D, I'll go to this button here, and there's D. So that's how those buttons work. Another basic function or button to know in this calculator, let's say you're in a mode that you want to get out of. So let's go to window, for instance. Notice if I keep hitting that clear button, it's not going to take me out of it. So if you can't get out of it with that button, your go-to button is going to be the quit button. Notice it's just here above mode in blue. So I'm going to click second and mode. And then I'm back to the main screen where I'm able to do any kind of math calculation that I want to. So today we're going to be focusing on the graphing feature. To graph on this calculator, you need to click this Y equals button. This is where you can graph your equation or equations if you have multiple. And then once you type them out, you hit the graph button and then they will appear here. So let's take a look at some of these graphs. We're referring to these functions as parent graphs. And the reason we do that is because these are the functions in their most basic form. They don't have any numbers added into them or any extra numbers multiplying by them. They're just the most basic you can get with these functions. On top of that, all of these graphs go through the origin 0, 0. So that's kind of what ties them all together. So let's start with f of x equals x squared. I'm going to go back to my y equals here. If I wanted to type that in, first off, you need to know where the X button is. Again, the green, we've already got all the letters of the alphabet in there, so you could easily get to X there, but there's an even quicker way. This button just below mode, the first letter there is X. Very easy way to access X. If you want any other letter, you'll have to hit alpha and then find it. To get squared, that's a button of its own. It is right here. Hit the squared, and it will pop up on its own. If you want anything larger than that, so if you want the 3, I'll show you another way to get to it, but there's an even quicker way. So if you want the 3, you'll go into math and then down to the third option that cubes your number, but an even quicker way to do it, and this will work for any number above 2. This arrow here is a caret, and then I can type in any number I want, and I could take it to that power. So I like to use the caret button personally. It's very user-friendly. Next, we have the square root function, the radical function. That is a button as well. The x squared button, if you notice just above it, we have that square root symbol. It is in blue, so to get to it, I'm going to have to hit the second button. Before I do that, I want to clear this out. When you use the square root, you have to type it in first. So I have second and then square root, and then I'll type in my x to get that. And then just to demonstrate the graphing feature really quickly, once you have that typed in here, you hit graph, and it will appear in the graph. Sometimes it takes a moment. By the way, this is on the lab up here in the directions if you haven't already noticed. It says make sure that your calculator is in zoom 6. What that means is you'll click the zoom button. And then we're talking about the number 6. That's called zoom standard. It's just the standard way to have the graph. You can always zoom in or out. I like to zoom in sometimes when it's kind of hard to see what's going on. And then if your graph is not viewable in this window, then you might want to consider zooming your graph out to kind of see it, because maybe it's higher or lower than you're used to having it. Something to think about. But otherwise, always default to zoom standard, unless otherwise you need to see something else. Next, we have the cube root of x. That you have to go to a very special place. So we're going to go back to that math button. And notice number 4 has that. And then I can type in x. If I want anything higher than the cube root, I'll go back to that math button. And number 5, let me go back to that really quickly. You notice that you have the x in the spot where the number usually would be. That means I can type any number that I want there. So I can make it a 5th root if I wanted to. Next, we have the absolute value function. Hopefully you are very familiar with that. You should be. To access that, you need to go into math again. This time, you're going to arrow over to number, and then it's the very first option. It's that ABS with the parenthesis. It stands for absolute value. When I click it, I have the absolute value symbol instead of those words. If you have a much older calculator than mine, then it might pop up exactly as it was written here. ABS with the parenthesis. That's the same thing, it's just visually going to look different. But if you have this calculator, or relatively newer one, you should see this. And then I can type in X. Another thing to be careful of, and I'm sure some of you have already kind of had an experience with this, typing in math functions, math equations on the computer. If I have like the absolute value of x plus 1, and all of that is inside of the absolute value, then I'll type it in. But say I had absolute value of just x and no plus 1. I'd have to, or absolute value of x and then the plus 1 is outside of it. I'd have to arrow over first and then type out the plus 1. Make sure you're very careful when you type those things in. It's very easy to mix the two up, and they are two very different results. Next, we have the reciprocal function. That's what it's called when you have the 1 over x. To get to this, one way you could do it is you could just type it out. This is like 1 divided by x. I know visually speaking, not the best way to type it for us personally. When you look at that, it's just, it's not as clear is the best way to say what I'm trying to say. So here's a nice trick to get it to look exactly like it's written here. I want to get to F1, that's in green, so I'm going to hit alpha and then the y equals button. And this box appears. This is a fraction box. These are the different ways we can write our fractions. The first option is your typical fraction, and this also includes improper fractions. Number 2 is for those of you who prefer to have your fractions as a mixed number, or if you have a question that asks for that. Number 3 is a conversion between an improper fraction to a mixed number and vice versa. And then number 4, you'll probably use quite a bit. That's converting from a fraction to a decimal, and again, vice versa. For now, I want just your regular fraction, whether it's improper or not. So I'm going to hit 1. 1 on top, arrow down, x on the bottom. If I want to add more to it, I could. Again, if you wanted to add more that was outside of the fraction, you're going to have to arrow over, and then you can add in your stuff. Also, if you make a mistake, like I just clearly did a moment ago, you can just use this delete button. You don't have to clear it out completely and then retype it in. I guess it just kind of depends on how large of a mistake you make. Last one I want to show you is this function here. You have not seen this before. This is called the greatest integer function. We'll discuss more about what exactly that means in class, but for now I just want to show you how to get to it in the calculator. So we have math, arrow over again to number, and then go down to number 5. You'll see the letters I and T. Those are short for integer. Now that time I did write it exactly with the letters in parentheses. It doesn't appear in this symbol. X, close off parentheses. And when you graph it, it looks like this. I took a moment to zoom it in so that it looks far less grainy from here, but hopefully you're able to get to it on your own calculator and you can see just how nice it really looks on the screen. That's pretty much all I had to show you in this video. I think that covers the true basics of this calculator. There are definitely going to be more questions on this as we move throughout the class, and I will do my best to show you these new buttons as we get to them. If you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to me either in person or via email. Otherwise, I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye!